Well, let's roll all the way back. Talk childhood.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up? Where were you born?
Rochester Hills, Michigan. So I was born, actually I was born in Troy, which is like a mile away from there. But my parents moved, I think when I was like 1 or something, and they've been in the same house since then. They're like still there in Rochester Hills, Michigan, which is like, it's like southeast Michigan. I say like Detroit area. I try to say southeast Michigan because it's like a suburb of Detroit, but it's like 45 minutes outside of it. But yeah, it was pretty like idyllic, I think, for being a kid, because it's like we had I mean, my parents still live there, which is kind of awesome. There's like this huge like cul-de-sac right out in front of our house, and so like we would play baseball and stuff like out there, and like it was a great place for just hanging out. And in the winter, because like they actually have winter back there. I haven't had winter in a long time. That's sort of weird. But yeah, in the winter, like the snowplows would like pile up the snow in the middle of the cul-de-sac, and we would like play King of the Hill and like dig it out and whatever. It was awesome. Like it was just like a really, I don't know. Yeah, like my childhood was awesome. Like being a kid was sweet in Michigan. Like the seasons are really cool. I think when you're a kid, it's like now I'm like old and I don't want to deal with it. Like I just loved. Yeah, it's like I don't want like super hot or humid weather, and I like don't want to see snow. San Francisco weather is amazing. It's like totally my wheelhouse of awesome. But yeah, when you're a kid, it's super cool that like you can go sledding in the winter, and then you can like go to the pool all the time in the summer, and it's like it's fantastic. Like I think it was great. But yeah, like I got 2 brothers. I got a younger and older brother. My older brother is a cop, which is like, it's really funny because he's like I don't know, I'm about like 6 feet tall. He's like 6'3" or 6'4", and he's like in shape. I'm sort of like not really in shape, and he's like in shape, and he's just like a very imposing version of me. Clean shaven, crew cut, no glasses. He got LASIK, so like, and he's got a jaw like a. He just looks like a cop. You just see him and you're like, you look like a cop. And he's awesome. Like it's weird. We're very different. He was like the jock growing up, and I was the nerd, and it was sort of like he's 3 years ahead of me. But he's really awesome, and he tells me unbelievable stories about being a cop. He actually started in Detroit because that was the easiest place to get a gig as a cop. So he was in downtown Detroit for 3 years or something like that before he was able to transfer out. He's got some really crazy stories from that. That was always awesome, like listening to like his crazy stories. But I think it's like I feel way better that like he's just way safer now than he was then. Like that, it just seems so dangerous, and the things that he would tell me about are just chasing crackheads around and busting dudes and just like the craziest shit that you've ever heard of. I'm just like, wow. And then my younger brother, he's like 7 years behind me, so there's like a pretty big gap. But he's just like my clone, basically. He's a taller, skinnier version of me, just like a clone. And he's like a really hardcore gamer. He's not in the industry, but he knows a little bit about programming. Like he has an engineering degree, and he's kind of a programmer. But he's like a really hardcore gamer. And I take a lot of my, I don't have as much time as I used to like play games, but I take a lot of suggestions from him on like what to check out, and he drags me into a lot of stuff. He dragged me into World of Warcraft. I was sort of like kind of against MMOs, and he kind of like dragged me into that, and I got really into it. It's awesome. And then yeah, the whole MOBA thing, he like was playing League of Legends. He dragged me into that, and then I kind of started falling away from that a little bit. Then he started playing Dota, and he's dragged me into that, so I'm playing Dota now. It's I think that whenever I don't understand a genre that he likes, I can always go to him and just be like, why do people like this? What's going on? You know, it's not that I don't like it, it's just that I don't understand it yet. And then he's really good at explaining like why it's really good, and like, you know, what's good about it, and sort of like walking me through it and stuff, and really helping like acclimate me to some of these like kind of more hardcore games and stuff. But then I get really into them and like usually really enjoy them. But yeah, he's in Seattle, and my older brother is still in Michigan, and so is my whole family. Like they're all still back there. So.
Did you all grow up playing games?
Yeah, actually we did. Like even my older brother, who's like, he kind of fell out of it like in high school, but we would play games all the time. I was like, really love the Atari. I think Atari 2600 is like where it started, and some really fucking amazing games on the 2600. But it was like the NES was like, that was like where it started, you know? I just remember saving up a ton of money to buy a NES, like, you know, mowing lawns and paper route and all that stuff, like saving up money to buy a NES. Seeing Super Mario Brothers like on, you know, seeing other people play Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt and stuff at the time was just like, I don't really consider myself a jealous person, but when I look back, I was like just green envy monster, you know? I just like, that was the thing I wanted more than anything else was a Nintendo. And yeah, but I think it was like that game's amazing. Like Super Mario 1 is fantastic, but I think it was really Zelda 1 was the game that that was like a religious experience almost. Like I really remember like getting that thing. Also based off of the ads. I don't know if you remember the original Legend of Zelda ad is completely insane. It's like this dude in a black turtleneck with black pants, and he's like in this weird room. I think he's supposed to be like crazy. I think that's like the thing. And he's saying the names of all the Zelda enemies, which are weird, like Octoroks and Tektites and Levers and stuff. And he's sort of like being crazy in this room, and they cut that with footage of the game, and which you've never really even seen this kind of like top-down sort of thing before. At least I hadn't. And I'm just like, what is that? I don't even know what that is, you know? But it's like, it's in the Nintendo Fun Club, so like, let's check it out kind of thing. And like that, oh man, that's a throwback. Nintendo Fun Club, that's awesome. Original member. Yeah, I just remember like the sense of like crazy mystery behind that game. Like I had never experienced anything like that where it's like, you know, it was more open and just there's secrets all over the place that are totally unmarked. Like how do you get through the Lost Woods? Like you have to read the Nintendo Fun Club. That's the only way to know, you know? It's like, it's crazy. And then also I really liked the sort of social lore that was built up around that game. And I feel like that's something that doesn't really happen as much anymore because of the internet and stuff. But at the time, it was like kids at school talking about it, you know? And then like, Ricky said he beat Ganon. Like, I don't believe him. You know, nobody's beaten Ganon kind of thing. Like, nobody's even found the 9th dungeon kind of stuff. Like, that was really amazing. Like, that, I just think that was like a very kind of formative time for me. And like that game was so important to me, just playing through that thing and trying to like unravel it and stuff was just amazing. I don't know. But yeah, I was always a big Nintendo kid, like Super Nintendo after that, and kind of tried to not get involved with the Genesis Super Nintendo debate. I waited for the SNES, like just went with the SNES. There's a lot of awesome games for the Genesis, but I feel like I sort of missed out on that. And then same with the PS1 era. Like that was, I didn't play a lot of PS1 games. Like I've gone back and played some of them, but yeah, mainly like Nintendo 64 stuff and like all the way through that. And I think it was sort of like through the N64 in college, that's sort of when I gravitated more towards like PC games. It's a lot easier to pirate PC games when you're in college and you're super broke. So yeah, I remember stealing a lot of games when I was in college on PC. But it's like, I think it's really cool. Like I have an appreciation for like all of, you know, I mean, handhelds and consoles and PC and just like everything. Like I don't know. I think it's, yeah, I was kind of talking about like my brother, like how if I don't understand something, it's like he can help me understand it. Like I think a lot of people artificially limit themselves to the games that they think they'll enjoy. And yeah, I kind of wish that people would give more stuff a chance, you know? Like, because yeah, I think that some people just, they like shooters and they consider themselves like mostly like a PC first-person shooter kind of player, but I bet if they played some of these other games, like, you know, it's like all these people can't be wrong kind of thing. I always try to have that mentality when I'm like going into like a new genre or like a new game that I don't understand, is that it's like, well, a lot of people are talking, like a lot of people like this. Like there's got to be something in there that's like really good about it. You know, there has to be. So yeah, just kind of rooting around for it, I think is really cool. You know.
Did games influence the direction you were taking with your life professionally? Like when you went to college, was that like the thing that you went for?
I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Like going into college, it was sort of like the kind of aimless nerd, good at math and science. My dad's a mechanical engineer, and it's really funny because he's been in advertising for like 30 years or something. He started in like being an engineer, a mechanical engineer out of college, and he just didn't really like it that much, and he's kind of switched into this more, I don't know, like more social kind of thing where he does a lot of talking and pitching and whatever, and he likes it a lot more. But he had an engineering degree, and he was sort of like, yeah, you like math and science, like you should just go into engineering and do it. And I was like, all right. I had no idea like what that really even meant at the time, you know, like I don't know, engineering, sure. And they had all these programs. I went to University of Michigan. Go Blue. I should probably say that, you know, get that out of the way. Which was really awesome, like really good school in Michigan. And yeah, I went into engineering, and they have all these like engineerings, you know, that you can like pick from and stuff. And they want you to kind of like pick one pretty early. It's a bunch of like stuff that you have to do in your first like year and a half, kind of getting requirements out of the way and stuff. But like they kind of want you to like aiming for one of those, and I had no idea. I was just like totally clueless. But like I liked computers, so I just took a couple programming classes, and then it was starting to be like, yeah, I should be like, I'm really bad at physics and chemistry. Like I should, you know, I should gravitate more towards this other thing that I understand more. So yeah, like really, like I think I kind of just moved towards computers, but it was more thinking like, oh yeah, I'll just get a job as a programmer. Like I always wanted to work in games, but everything was so different back then. That was probably like 98? How long ago was that? Yeah, that was almost 15 years ago. Holy crap. Okay. So yeah, I was about halfway through college, and I was just, you know, I really wanted to like work in games, but it just seemed like a pipe dream. Like everybody that I talked to, even professors and stuff, they were just sort of like, you know, they would just give me weird looks or whatever whenever I asked them about it. And I was like, okay, like I'll get a job writing banking software or something. You know, that was kind of like what I thought I was going to end up doing. And I think going into like kind of junior year, I was like getting really bummed out about that, you know. But it was cool. They sort of, as you sort of go through the computer, it was computer engineering, I think was technically the thing. It's just like computer science, but in engineering, it's basically the same. But as you go through it, they kind of shepherd you into these more like group-oriented projects and stuff. And I remember finding some other people that were like, you know, really they were like gamers, and they were like, had same sensibilities and stuff. So for one of our big like software engineering classes, we were like, let's just make a game. That's like a big software engineering kind of thing. Like, let's see what we can do, you know? We had taken like one graphics class together, and then sort of like, you know, 300 level programming classes, and that's really like all we knew. And all this information was not available. Like right now, like there's all these tools, all these engines, all this like information. It's like amazing, and all this encouragement of people just being like, yeah, you can do it. Like it's amazing. And then you see stuff like the cart life guy. I mean, that dude like had no training, no experience. He just like, and I remember in his when he won that award, the like Nuovo thing, he gets up there when he finally spoke after winning like his 3rd or 4th award. He was like, anybody can do it, man. Anybody can be here if you want to be. And I was like, that's awesome, because it just was not like that like when I was in school.
And the idea of being able to do it alone, the tools are super easy. Everybody jump in and replace me as soon as you can. It's super. It's easier than you think. Thanks.
But yeah, we were just like let's try it. Like whatever, it can just be our project. We'll just work on it for this class, and we just started doing it. I remember that game. I don't know why, but it was called Severance. I think it's just because we thought the word was cool. But it was a light cycle clone, like the Tron light cycle game. So it was 2-player hot seat 3D Tron light cycle game that we made, and just no experience. We had no idea what we were doing. But we did end up making like a playable OpenGL version of that you could like sit down and like play a few games on. And it was super cool. And it really showed me that like somebody has to do this. You know, it's like somebody out there has to get paid to make games. Like that's, I don't know, it was like a revelation where I was like, wow, like this is maybe a thing, you know? And so I took some more classes and yeah, I don't know. I found this professor, Dr. Laird, shout out for if he's watching this. He was the AI professor at Michigan, and he had some connections like to game companies because he was like really interested in AI and like trying to you know, either integrate his research into games or have his research be sort of directed by games and stuff. And that was really cool. He was like I took his AI course and kind of like got to know him a little bit, just enough to like kind of wedge my foot into his like internship connections. And I landed this internship at High Voltage Software, and they're still around. Like they did the Conduit and they did a lot of stuff. Like they're like work for hire studio like in the Chicago area. And I think that was after, yeah, I had 4.5 years of school. So that was after, like I didn't graduate. It was after my 4th year. I went to Chicago and like, man, I had no idea what I was doing. I remember being so nervous like going into that because it's just like, these are a bunch of like professional game devs and I'm like going into this thing for a few months and I don't like, wow, like totally crazy. That was, yeah, I just remember being completely overwhelmed and like not being super helpful, like learning a lot, but yeah, not being the most helpful thing. And then after that, like I went back, finished school, and I was like, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to go to Chicago, because they were really far out in the suburbs of Chicago, and I was like, but I found Outrage Games, so they came from Parallax, who did Descent 1 and 2, and then they split into Outrage, which is where I was interviewing, and then the other one is Volition, which like a lot of people don't know that like that was sort of the seed of that, and now it's like, wow, like they make Saints Row and they make all these like AAA games and stuff, but Outrage made Descent 3, and then that was right around the time that I was like interviewing and stuff, and they just happened to be looking for like a junior programmer, and I was like just graduating then, and they were like, sweet, like they offered me the job, and I was just like, what? Like, I don't know anything. I was like, I don't know anything. This is amazing. Yeah, Matt Toshlock, the guy that ran that studio, fantastic dude. Super imposing looking. He is about 6'4", white dude with a goatee, and he has dreadlocks that go down to his ass. He is like when I first met him, I was just like, hey Matt, like, oh my God. But he's like the nicest guy ever. It's amazing. But he's just like so physically intimidating looking. And I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe, like I'm talking, and it's like I had played Descent. I did not like Descent. It made me ill. Like first person games usually don't make me sick, but it's like the 6 degrees of freedom or whatever, the fact that you're going upside down and inside out and whatever. I just could not get into that game at all. And so I remember interviewing there, I was like, well, we'll see, we'll give it a shot. They were totally changing their direction to console-focused character action games and stuff. And I was like, well, this is awesome. And they offered me a job, and I'm just like, sweet, it was awesome. So, and I learned a lot working there. I was there for about 3 years, working on Alter Echo. That was like my first credit. And we wrapped that game up, and then I remember that was like a super weird day because they called everybody into like the conference room the day that like we went gold, and it was like, and Matt was like, hey, congratulations, like we're gold, that's it. And everybody been crunching like crazy, and it was just like, yes, be like, and also that's your golden ticket in the games industry, is like you get one ship title. And you're like, it's like being a made man in the mob. At least it used to be. I don't think it's like that anymore, but it really was. Like you get one shipped credit on a console title or a PC title or whatever, but on a like real game, And like, yeah, you're like a made man. You're like in. You'll be able to go get another job, no problem. So I'm like, yes. And then he's like, oh, but there is some bad news. THQ will be closing the studio. And we're just like, it was just like this incredible, like, I mean, I think very few times in life do you ever have like mega high followed, 30 seconds later by just like an insane low where you're just like, oh God. And there aren't a lot of game companies in Michigan. So I was super devastated. The dudes that we had, the crew that we had at that place, they were all super awesome. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. They're fantastic. Like I really miss working with those guys in a lot of ways. Very tight-knit kind of crew working on games there. Just awesome. And it was sort of knowing that they were going to get scattered. Knowing that it was like this really cool thing that was then going to get like broken up and sort of like I don't know, lost in the whatever. Super sad. But yeah, I don't know that. Yeah, I remember at that time I was so angry that I called up. We don't have to keep talking about this thing. Yeah, I called up. I was so angry the next day. So THQ sent 2 people from HR to like deliver our severance and sort of like give us the details and stuff. And I asked them like where, hey, like you're laying off all these people, like what, where's the axe man basically? I didn't say that, but like where's like who actually is responsible for making this decision? And they're like, oh, Jack Sorensen, he's VP of external development. I don't know what his job was. And I was like, well, why isn't he here? And they're like, well, he's really busy. And I'm like, but you're late. All right, whatever. So I called THQ Corporate. I looked it up online, and I called THQ Corporate in Calabasas, California. I called them up. I got the front desk, and I was like, I'd like to speak to Jack Sorensen, please. And the woman that answered the phone, she was like, he's out. Like, can I take a message? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm thinking this, I'm like, yeah, you can take a message. My name's Brad Muir. I work for Outrage Games. I worked for Outrage Games. I'd like to talk to him about what happened, and here's my phone number. Whatever. Click. Okay. So I'm like, typical. So my phone rings like 2 hours later, and I'm like, I don't recognize this number, and I answer it, and I'm like, yeah, hello, and he's like, the dude is like, hey, is Brad there? I'm like, yeah, this is Brad. He's like, hey, this is Jack Sorensen, VP of whatever. Hey, Brad, and I'm like totally dumbstruck. I'm like, I was calling up this dude to like yell at him, and I was like, and they actually called me back, and I was just like, that's amazing. Like I was totally shocked, and I was just like, yeah, like it really blows that we have this, we have this group of dudes, we have this engine, like we have all this stuff. The other thing that made me really angry, we sort of had like a game pitch competition at the studio to kind of decide what our next game was going to be. And I worked on this concept with another guy at the studio, and our submission made it into the top 3. And so I didn't know it at the time, but that was a pretty terrible game pitch. Just in terms, it was like a 3-page game design document with like 1 piece of art or something. It was not really like the best game pitch that you could have, like now that I know everything that I know. And that's weird. I like really haven't thought about that in a long time. But anyway, it was called The Shade, and it was like an open world. Probably shouldn't like just give away all my good ideas. And it was like an open world GTA without cars in Gaslight London, where you're this dude who like got sacrificed by a cult, and now you're sort of this like smoky, shadowy dude, and it's all about like possessing people in the open world kind of environment and running them around, and they have different abilities and stuff. So it's like replace the cars with people in GTA in like kind of Jack the Ripper-esque style thing, and like, yeah, that was pretty good. Especially then, that was like, mid PS2 era. Like I think it could have been really sweet. Yeah, so we had that and a couple other concepts, and I had a plane ticket to Calabasas, California, where we were going to pitch these games. Like they had actually snowed us in, maybe not on purpose, but it certainly felt like it was on purpose when I look back at it. Where I was gonna go pitch our next game. Things are looking pretty good, all this stuff. And then it's like, oh no, the studio's closed. So I was like, Jack, I had a ticket, we were gonna come to THQ Corporate, talk about our next game, and you just like canceled the whole studio, like, and he's like, yeah, well, it's business. I think he said something about it being business and like, it's unfortunate, but it happens. And I was like, yeah, but like, couldn't you have come yourself? Like, couldn't you do it yourself? If you're gonna tell all these people that they're now out on the street and you're gonna shutter the whole studio, like, couldn't you just do it in person? And he's like, actually, yeah, I could. He's like, I probably could have. He's like, I'm super busy, but yeah, for things like that, maybe I should have done that, And I was like, all right, that's all I have to say, and that's it. That was the end of it. But it's like, yeah, it actually felt really good to actually like talk to him as a human. I was kind of sad that he wasn't more like the Lee Petty in the video where I could like rage at him and he would rage back at me. It was kind of more human interaction than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, I don't know. That was a bummer because everybody, everybody ended up everywhere. Like some people went to Blizzard and Valve and Sucker Punch and Insomniac and like all over the place. And Volition, a lot of dudes ended up at Volition, which is really cool. But yeah, that was a bummer. And I did kind of an interview circuit, which was super interesting. The worst one, oh man. So this is one of the main reasons why I'm not a programmer, is when you go interview for a programming gig, they will whiteboard you, most likely. And they will put you for the people that have never been through this, they will put you in front of a whiteboard, they'll make you stand up, and then they'll put 4 super amazing programmers, just like their 4 best guys. And they'll put them in a room, and then they give you a marker, and then they say, hey, here's a problem that comes up in game programming all the time. Why don't you just write some code on the board? Walk through how you'd solve this. And I'm like, I feel like my brain is not, I don't know, the back burners of my brain are way better than the front burners of my brain, I think. So like, so I was very poor in this kind of environment. And I remember it was San Diego. It was Sammy at the time. Sammy USA. They've been renamed to, I think it's the High Moon. They were High Moon, but they were working on Dark Watch. That was the game. And I actually played that game later, and I really liked it. It's like the vampire cowboy thing with like whatever. It's like, I really liked it. It's like a little silly, but it was super fun. But I was interviewing there. They showed me a little bit of the game for 5 minutes in the morning. They had a whole day of interviews planned, or so I was told, because they flew me out there. I went in, at 10, straight to the whiteboard, saw the game for a second, saw some concept art, went straight to the whiteboard. I'm in there, and I just fucking train wrecked it. I train wrecked it so hard. They're asking me simple stuff. I got tripped up on the first one, and then it was just this cascading failure where I just kept making mistakes, and then they'd be like, oh, actually, no, that's wrong. And I'd be, oh, sorry about that. I'm erasing stuff with my hand. I'm getting whiteboard marker on my hand, and I'm just like, just having the worst experience, just like the worst. And then after that, they're like, yeah, so we'll just call you a cab, take you back to your hotel. It's like 11:30. So that sucked. That was like a really, that was an awful experience. My other reviews went a lot better though. And I didn't fail the whiteboard all the time, but I decided to go to a Raven in Madison, Wisconsin. And that was like, it was kind of cool. It felt like sort of a small step away from like, so Outrage was right where University of Michigan was in Ann Arbor, and Madison feels like a really similar place. They're almost like twins, they're really very similar, like liberal Midwestern cities with big colleges in them, So going to Raven was really cool, like just because the city was very similar. I felt pretty much at home there, and I was working on X-Men Legends, the first one, and I got that gig through a recruiter actually, like a recruiter. Like I was using some recruiters to like help me find jobs, and I landed that one, and the interview went really well, and it was cool. And everybody at Raven is really cool, especially the guy at the top. The Raffel brothers run that thing, and they're just the nicest guys. I mean, both of them were I could not believe how just stand up, super nice dudes and gamers, man. Gamers. Like Raffel would just run around. He's the guy getting people together to play hardcore Diablo 2 during lunch. Do you know what I mean? He owns the place. He runs the place, and he's like so excited about it, you know? It's like that. I found that really inspiring. That it was just like, man, this guy's like running this thing, but why is he running it? Not because it's a business, but because he fucking loves video games. You know, that's why he's running it. That was super rad. And there were tons of cool people there working on X-Men Legends. That was a bit of a bummer because when we had cool ideas, they all had to be like routed through Marvel and stuff. And so that just sort of, I think that really taught me like the value of like new IP and like making your own world and making your own rules, is because whenever it runs into the like gameplay, you can just change the fiction. You can just be like, I think it would be cool if these people could use magic, sure. You know, and just, yeah, let me just update the done, bam. You know, and then the game's more fun. So it was sort of hard, especially with X-Men Legends, because it's an RPG. You know, it's like really, it was like, man, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance game's super fun. It's like, you know, Diablo for consoles kind of feeling. They're like, what if you could do that with a team of 4 X-Men? Sweet. Like that was, you know, yeah, totally. But then you have like all these crazy problems that show up where it's like, well, like what kind of equipment slots does Wolverine have? Like what? It's like, what is a level 1 Cyclops? Like, that's weird. Like there's just some weird kind of like mechanics that they had to work into an existing fiction, and it was difficult. I mean, it just caused a lot of friction and they totally made it work. But it's just like, you know, compare that to when you're just making your own IP. You just make up all the rules, whatever's good for the game, you just throw it in there, and it's like totally fine. So I had applied at Double Fine and during my like interview circuit stuff, and apparently my resume got lost or something. I think that jobs@doublefine.com actually just was going to Tim at that point. And he was, even at that time, was getting so much email that it just got lost, I guess. So one of my good buddies from Outrage actually got a gig here. Dion, amazing dude, Dion Hopkins. And he was doing like, he was our like effects guy at Outrage. We called him the Magic Fingers, because he's, this is making me want to like call him up right now and be like, dude, I'm talking about you in this interview. I hope it's okay. Because he's like, oh man, he's kind of a short, stocky dude, and he has really short, like little sausage fingers. So we call him the Magic Fingers at Outrage. And he's just like really talented artist, especially in like the VFX stuff and everything. And he had landed a gig out of here straight away, and apparently they were looking for gameplay programmers shortly after he got hired, and he like called me up and he's like, dude, they like are really looking for gameplay programmers. And I was like, I've been here for 2 months. What are you doing? Like, why didn't you tell me 2 months ago? And so I was like, okay, I really wanted to work there, because I think that Psychonauts had been announced just as like a couple screenshots. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. It's from the guy that made Full Throttle. Like, are you serious? This is great. He's making console games now too? Amazing. Into it. So it just felt super irresponsible, but I like put in a sick day and I flew out to San Francisco and like did an interview here. Oh man, and I remember just being, I don't know, it was just amazing. Just like coming to a huge city. I'd never been to San Francisco before. Just coming to like this big crazy environment, and like just the studio is the same place we've been in the whole time since I got hired. And like this office is amazing, and it feels very like techie, startup-y, kind of whatever. There's Aeron chairs everywhere. It was just like, yeah, it was like really, really amazing. And like being able to sit down and like talk to Tim Schafer and just like hang out with him for an hour and just talk to him about like what I want to do and whatever. And one of the things that was really attractive to me was that they didn't have a lot of designers. They only had Eric Robson, only had one designer on Psychonauts, and that the gameplay programmers are relied upon for a lot of the design that actually takes place in the games. And I was like, that's awesome. Because at Raven, they definitely have a more, I feel like Texas style is maybe the kind of like coming from id. I feel like id sort of birthed that, like, okay, the engine gives you a lot of tools so that somebody with a more artistic background who's a level designer can script up the entire experience and sort of, you know, they are almost like doing, it's more like about level design and scripting as opposed to like gameplay programming that's close to the player. It's just a different like style about how you break it up. And so at Raven, I was kind of bummed that maybe I would never really be a designer because I wasn't like a 3D level kind of guy. You know, it's like they sort of had tied game design to level design in that studio. And so I was like, oh man, I might not be able to like move out of programming. But here I was like, wow, like they don't even have any designers. Like I smell an opportunity, you know, like and I think I did talk to Tim about that, like on my interview, and he was like, yeah, he's like, you know, people move between roles, and we're really open, and blah blah blah, and I'm like, sweet. So I made the decision to like just totally bail on Raven. I'd been there, and yeah, I was there, and this was really funny and kind of sad, but I went in and I was like super nervous, and I talked to the top guys there, you know, the guy that had really hired me, and I was like, hey, I got this offer to go to San Francisco, like, really, like, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna go because I think I can be a designer. I think I'm gonna take it. Like, you guys are awesome, but I think this would be really good for my career if I did this. And they're like, they tried to talk me out of it for a second, and then I was like, no, I gotta go. And they're like, all right, fair enough. They're like, okay, so we'd really like you to put in your 2 weeks. And I was like, I want to put in my 2 weeks. I want to finish the thing I'm working on right now, like just be as professional as possible, because I felt really bad about it. And they're like, okay, so tomorrow will be your last day. And I was like, what? What do you know? And I'm thinking they're like throwing me out, like, you know, like we'll bring you a box of your stuff kind of style. And but he was actually, they were actually like, no. Since you came to us through a recruiter, if you work 90 days, we owe you, like, we have to pay the recruiter 10% of your salary or something as a finder's fee. So if you work 89 days and then quit, and then you quit, we don't have to pay them. So they're like, we'd like you to stay for 2 weeks, but yeah, tomorrow's your last day. And I'm like, okay. And then Double Fine, they were like, yeah, we need programmers as soon as possible. So like, as soon as I told them, they're like, sweet, we're gonna get you out here. Because I was like, oh, maybe I'll drive cross country. That would be cool. And they're like, no, that'll take too long. We need people right now. They're like, we will fly you out and all this stuff. And I'm just like, wow, this is happening really fast. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is weird. But like, yeah, they took care of a ton of stuff to just like get me out here and get me working on Psychonauts. And yeah, that was crazy. That was crazy to just like get on a plane where it's really cold and then come here where it's like not really cold, and then be in this giant city and like trying to find an apartment while I'm like also trying to come to work, and like it was totally nuts. I don't know. Also, they had told me that Psychonauts was about 4 months from kind of going into beta. Oh man, it was so far away.